So we are back in South Korea, and I just want to tell you a little bit about what's been going on here. So as you guys know, Mighty Warrior, our focus is to empower women to be free from exploitation and human trafficking. And in South Korea, that often looks like dealing with both the human trafficking world and the prostitution world. And what I'm learning specifically on this trip that the Lord is highlighting really is about teenage runaways, young people, and orphanages. So one of the things that we've really been focusing on since I've been here on this trip, I've been here now about 3 weeks in South Korea, is really partnering with different organizations who are focused on Gen Z teenagers and specifically runaway teenagers. One of the associations that I have come across here, they partner with the Soup Kitchen and Homeless Shelter, which is in Gyeonggi-do Province, south of Seoul, about an hour and a half from where my apartment is. And I just went there to serve and to partner and to just be the hands and feet of Jesus. And it wasn't until I was actually serving there that I learned that they have a ministry for teenagers specifically. There are about 250,000 teenagers that live on the street here in South Korea. And the statistics that I have read in previous years is about 200,000 teenagers run away every year. I think that's been updated to about 250,000 teenage runaways on the street at any given time here in Korea. And most of the reasons that they run away are abuse, either alcoholism, it can be sexual abuse, it can be a mental abuse. Teenagers actually have very stressful lives here. The way that in the West we apply to university, they apply to high school. And so their middle school years is really setting them up for success for the entire rest of the year. And what high school they get into determines what college they can even apply for, and that determines what job they can even apply for. So it feels like for them, I used to be a teacher here in Korea with middle school students, and one of the things that we learned is really just how stressful their lives are and how difficult it is for them. So when you add on abuse in the home, when you add on alcoholism, when you add on suicide, Korea has one of the highest teenage suicide rates in the world. You have a lot of children that are just desperate for a change, and a lot of them believe, the ones who run away, that that is the only way that they will survive, is to run away. So this organization specifically that I went to literally just serve the homeless, we serve them food. They serve 450 to 500 elderly, both homeless and impoverished. Not all of them are completely not with a house or without a house. A day, 6 days a week. And then this organization also has houses for teenagers who run away, for those who are freshly out of their teenage years, 19 to 25-ish, and still looking to get back on their feet. And then they have this street bus ministry where they go around at nighttime from 4 p.m. I believe until 10 or 11 p.m. and they bring food, they build relationship, they actually bring counselors to create a place for these kids to just have someone to talk to and to verbally process what they're going through. And when I was meeting with the founder of this organization and was telling him kind of what we do as Mighty Warrior, our heart is to help young people get free from human trafficking and sexual exploitation in Northeast Asia. And he was saying we're about one level below that. So where you're dealing with kids who've kind of already ended up in the underworld, we're working with children, teenagers, and young people who are on the brink but have not yet gone into kind of the underworld. Either they've already run away from home, they've not run away yet, but they're on the brink of running away from home, or they technically have a home still with their families, but they spend most of their time on the street because they can't be at home due to abuse and other issues. So he said, we're trying to prevent them from ending up in the underworld, which is where you're kind of operating, and trying to get kids who've gone into the underworld back out before that just takes over their life, or a lot of them end their lives with and in suicide. So this week was the second time that I served and volunteered with this organization, just serving food. No one there speaks English, and so my role is to hand out the spoons and chopsticks to the other people as they're coming into the soup kitchen. And it really has touched my heart, even the way that this organization operates. It is run by a Catholic priest from Italy. So it is in nature originally, it is a Christian organization. However, he said that they operate very openly, that they accept people from different organizations to come and to serve with them. And they do pray before they start serving. But what I love about the way that this organization operates is as the people line up outside before they come in and they get served by those volunteering at this shelter, is we go one by one, every person. They do 400 to 500 people a day. So everyone who's lined up before it's time for us to actually serve food, we as the volunteers line up also, and we go past them one by one with our hands on our heads like this, which in Korean actually means I love you. So we're saying 사랑합니다, which is an abbreviated form of 사랑합니다, saying I love you. And I asked the priest, like, this is so beautiful. Where did you come up with this? And he said, you know, a lot of these people, they don't have families, they don't have anyone who's coming alongside them. That's why they're eating at a soup kitchen every day. He said, and we might be the only face that smiles at them. We might be the only face that tells them, I love you, that somebody loves you. And so each day before we serve them, we go one by one and we look them in the eye and we say, 사랑합니다, I love you. Another thing that really struck me about the heart of this organization, I was actually crying the first day that I went. They put me on sukkarak, which is chopstick duty. Chopsticks are sukkarak and jokkarak, spoon and chopsticks. And he said, when you, actually nobody said it to me because it was all, nobody there speaks English. So they just demonstrated to me how I am to greet the people who are coming in and how I am to hand them their spoon and chopsticks. And the way that we do that is we do it with two hands. That's how you honor people here in Korea, is you hand them things with two hands and you bow and you hand it to them like this. And he showed me, this is how I want you to greet every single person that comes in here, which again spoke just to the way that they honor those that they're serving, that they don't actually take this lightly. They take it very, very seriously, and they just carry the heart of God in the way that they serve, that we bow to every person who walks into this room. We hand them their chopsticks with two hands to show that we honor them. And I just felt the heart of God for not only these people as they walked in and the way that he loves them and the way that he values them, but even his heart for this organization, the way that they serve and the way that they honor these people who society considers kind of the lowest of the low. There were a few young people who came through. I knew that this organization dealt with homeless people, which included runaways. I did not realize that they had an entire Gen Z runaway ministry, which got me really excited, because here I can't do anything if the Lord doesn't open doors. I don't know people in the organizations. I don't know people in the government. I don't know people in human trafficking. Everything that I do is through the Lord literally supernaturally opening a door, introducing me to someone. And so when I learned that about that organization after I already served them, I was like, oh Jesus, like this is you, right? And I asked if I could serve with their teenage outreach at nighttime. They told me, your Korean's not strong enough. We need you to be able to operate without translation. So I'm still working on that. I have Korean class 1 to 2 times a week, depending on the week. But that would be something that I would love to be able to partner with them in. But for now, we're just serving in the soup kitchen. Another thing that I really felt the Lord highlighting is I've been doing prayer walks around the city. And as I was leaving the soup kitchen, I had just finished serving and I was walking back to the metro station and just praying. And I felt the Lord say, turn right. There was like a street. There's the main street where the metro station is. And before that, there was another street. And I felt the Lord say, turn right and go walk down that street. And as I'm walking down that street, there's all these flashing lights and flashing signs. And I just have this sense like this is a red light district. And in Korea, they bulldozed a lot of the red light districts from 2020 to 2022. Prior to that, there were quite a few red light districts in and around Seoul. The remaining red light districts are now in Paju and then around the military bases, both US military bases and Korean military bases. But all the ones that were in the city proper, most of them were bulldozed or they repurposed those buildings. However, most of them were actually physically bulldozed because the people wanted kind of to save face, and they didn't just want to repurpose the building, they actually wanted those buildings to be gone. So you don't find red light districts very much in Seoul, but as I was walking down the street, I just sensed like, wow, there's something really dark and sexual happening here. When I was still serving at the soup kitchen, I just had this sense that the men, it's primarily men. There were women that come, but I would say maybe 2 women for every 8 men. And as they were coming through, I just had this sense that a lot of them deal with porn and that they buy sex. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. These people are lonely. A lot of them don't have families. And so anyway, as I turn down the street and I feel the Lord wanting me to prayer walk this street. And so I start to walk down and I just have this sense like there's a lot of sexual activity here. And in Korea, you see norebangs everywhere. And a norebang is a singing room. It's like in Japanese, they would call it a karaoke room, right? But karaoke is a Japanese word. In Korean, the word for sing is nore. The word for room is bang. So norebang is a singing room. And often they are underground. And so, as opposed to like in Western karaoke, where you go up on a stage and you're in front of a lot of people, in Asian karaoke, often you're in a private room. So it might be a private room for 2 people, it could be a private room for 10 people, it could be a big private room. And it was every single building was a norebang. And what I learned here on my last trip is that norebangs are often either fronts for trafficking, or they just include trafficking, prostitution, and bar girls as just part of their business model. So it's not unusual to be able to call girls or bar girls, cocktail waitresses, whatever you want to call them, within a norebang. But there are some norebangs that actually bring in trafficked girls. And the way that it was explained to me last year, I was at the house church that I go to, and they had invited me to share what it was that I was doing, why I was in Korea. And one of the men in the house church came up to me after, and he was a former gang member. He said, I was one of the leaders of the Korean American gang in Los Angeles. I was prosecuted. I went to prison in the US, and then I was deported, and I came back to Korea, and the Lord radically encountered me, and I got saved. And he said, however, here in Korea, I'm still very connected to kind of the underworld. He said, a lot of my friends are in gangs. And he said, usually when they talk about like the girls they're bringing in from Brazil, or the girls they've brought from China, or he's like, when they're talking about moving these girls, and this woman has 80 girls and this woman has so many girls. And he's like, I just walk away from those conversations because I can feel like, oh, that's not God. I don't want to be part of this. And he said, I walk away, but he said, I didn't register that what they're talking about is human trafficking. He said, I know people that are in human trafficking. Like, I know people who are doing the trafficking. He said, I don't know the girls, but I know some of the traffickers. And that was really eye-opening to me, because I had not met anyone. When you ask a Korean about human trafficking, they have like zero awareness of what you're talking about, or maybe they think it's something in the West. They just have zero concept. Even when I say it in Korean, like inshin meme, sung meme, human trafficking, prostitution, they know about prostitution. Many Koreans believe that women who are prostitutes here are doing it by choice because they're making a lot of money, when actually 80% of those in prostitution here have some sort of pimp or someone controlling them, or they're in a debt bondage to somebody. Most of them are not just doing it on their free will because they like attention and want to make money. But that is the taboo way of thinking about it, and the taboo way of speaking about it here in Korea. So as I was speaking to him more about this topic, and he was explaining to me, yes, this woman, she has a building and she has about 100 girls under her, and this woman, she has another building and there were so many girls under her, 80, 200, like we're talking big numbers. And I said, what's the connection between that and the norebangs? And he said, well, what happens is a group of men, often older men, will go into a norebang, they'll start drinking, and they want girls, but they don't just want regular cocktail waitresses, they want young girls. And so if they want young girls, they will call up one of these mama-sans. A mama-san is someone who is in charge of the girls. She might be the trafficker, or she might just be the manager of the girls. And he says they call the mama-sans, they say, we want 6 girls to this room, ages 18 to 19, or ages, technically they're supposed to be 18 years old, but oftentimes they deal with underage girls here too. And they'll have them dressed a certain way, they want them in school uniforms, or they tell her exactly what they want. She sends somebody with the girls, they deliver the girls, and then they take the girls back. So that's often how the norebangs are actually connected to maybe trafficking rings or prostitution here in Korea. So when I'm walking through the street and I'm seeing that every single building is one of these singing rooms, and I'm starting to ask questions to God, like, what am I sensing here? What am I picking up? Because this doesn't just feel, there are some rooms here that are just innocent, and there's coin ones, and they're not all wrapped up in this darkness, but I was having a sense that these ones were wrapped up in darkness. And as I started to read the signs on, because in Korea the businesses go up, so there's a first floor, but then the building next to you might be 4 stories or 10 stories high, and there's levels of businesses going up, so you can't just read the signs in front of you, you have to look up. So as I'm starting to read the signs, I'm seeing norebang, which are all underground. And then I'm seeing masaji, which means massage parlor, Thai Thai massage, live, which means live girls, dancers, and hotel. In Korea, a motel is for sex. So when I'm starting to put together these things, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, this is a red light district. Because traditionally a Korean red light district will have glass. It'll be a big glass building, and there will be girls inside. You can see them, often not dressed. But those kinds of red light districts you're going to see more in Paju or outside the city. There is one still in Seoul that had kind of gone away, but they have revived it in Yeouido, which is south of the Han River. But really, that's more what people think of or what they picture when they think of a red light district. This one was a lot more discreet, and it just reminded me and spoke to me about how it didn't go away when they demolished the red light districts in the city, that it just went underground. It's just harder to find, it's just more discreet, but it's not actually gone. And the statistics here are insane. The number of men who've bought sex, number of men who buy sex on a regular basis, and prostitution here, 80% of men in Korea have bought sex at least one time. So these statistics are actually insanely high. And when I'm asking the organizations that I'm meeting with here, like, how does that even happen? You know, how do you find that this is such a common phenomenon? And what has been explained to me is that it's connected to the military service. All boys in Korea in their early 20s are required to do military service. And often it's in the military service that they are then introduced to prostitution, if they haven't been introduced to it as teenagers. So in Paju, you're gonna find these big glass rooms with lights on them, and often naked girls either dancing or doing their hair or sitting. But here it was much more discreet. And so I walked the one street, and there were no women, it was only men. And some of them were drunk, and I'm like, it's 6 o'clock on a Thursday. But as I walked, the Lord said, keep going. And so I just kept prayer walking, and I realized it wasn't just the one street, it was like a whole section near this metro station of motels, massage parlors, norebangs with girls, and they would have like pictures of like silhouettes dancing girls, business clubs. I kept saying this business club and that business club, and I'm like, a business club in a red light district, that doesn't sound sus at all. And so I prayer walked the whole area, and it just reminded me, like, one, it's not gone, it's just underground. Two, the Lord is actually going to direct me and highlight where I need to go, because otherwise I don't know where to go. I can go to Paju, and when I was here last year, I was with an organization who is Guknae Kigu. They're a domestic Korean anti-trafficking organization, and their role really is to help equip those in public service and in the government to understand what trafficking is, because one of the biggest problems here is that they prosecute the victims instead of the traffickers, the pimps, etc. So often they will prosecute women for prostitution. If she comes in and says she was raped, she might get prosecuted for prostitution specifically, when really, instead of asking more questions to find out what's really going on, once she has a record, she can't get government help for it. They do have a lot of help here, a lot of social services for people who are victims, for people who've been part of, for runaway teenagers, for victims of trafficking, exploitation. Like, there's tons of resources. And when I meet with this organization, she tells me the biggest issue here is that they can't find the girls who are trafficked, one. Two, the girls who have come forward have been prosecuted, and once they're prosecuted, they have a record, and then they cannot get government assistance. So in Paju, they were there because that's where the red light district is, and so they were doing a seminar for people who worked for the government and for police officers to help teach them what's really happening here, so that they quit prosecuting the victims and they understand the full picture. Instead of just looking at this girl as a prostitute, they're going to realize, like, oh, actually she's probably in some sort of debt bondage, and we need to ask more questions, and we need to try to help her, not just arrest her. And so they had invited me to come to this meeting and to get up and introduce myself, tell them why I'm here, why I have a heart for Korea, and why the world cares about human trafficking. Because oftentimes in not just Korea, but in East Asia, like, people have blinders on. They're taught, just focus on what you're supposed to do, just focus on your life, don't look at what's happening around you. And that's why I think the problem here is so large, in the sense of people don't know what's going on. They have zero awareness of things that are happening right in front of their eyes. And so we really just need to educate them and help them understand. And that's part of what this organization specifically does. So I've been starting to meet with organizations, starting to understand what the situation is here, because before we as Mighty Warrior just come in and strategically plan and start building, I need to continue to understand the full picture of what's happening here, because the strategies that I've learned in the Philippines and in Cambodia and in trafficking rescue work in other countries doesn't work here because things operate differently. You're dealing with a lot of deep fake AI. Deep fake is AI porn. You're dealing with sexual exploitation online. You're dealing with teenagers who are actually exploiting other teenagers. They're trafficking other teenagers. They're making porn about other teenagers, and it's being bought and sold by teenagers. So there's a huge incentive to get a hold of Gen Z, because yes, of course we can go after those in prostitution and the older generation who deal with more like traditional, how it traditionally looks. But when you're dealing with the younger generation, it's a completely different ballgame. And there are other organizations here who focus specifically on online sexual exploitation, sextortion, and even the world has started to pay attention. Netflix made a documentary called Cyber Hell about the nth room cases, which are a very famous case here in Korea about sexual exploitation of teenagers on the internet. So it's, in a lot of these kids, they live at home. Whereas in maybe South America or Central America, the kids are kidnapped before I mean, the trafficking involves kidnapping. Here, it doesn't necessarily involve kidnapping, especially when you're dealing with runaway teenagers. They've actually left home. And there's a thing in Korea called helpers. The helpers are not actually helping, they're pretending to help. They're coming alongside those runaway teenagers and saying, oh, I'll give you a bed. Oh, I'll give you clothes. I'll feed you. And then on the back end, maybe weeks later, maybe months later, saying, actually, now you owe me a debt for everything that I've done for you, and you're going to work it off through sexual services. You're going to work it off by fill in the blank, and they start to exploit them. Most of the time sexually, but it can also be labor exploitation or labor trafficking. But most commonly here in this scenario, especially with runaways, we're dealing with sexual exploitation from these helpers. And then the other big one is the online exploitation, where it often happens through video games. It happens through chat rooms where a grown adult is pretending to be a young girl and sends a naked or exploitive picture of a young girl to a young boy. And it's like, okay, I sent you a photo, now you send me a photo. So he sends a photo back. Teenagers, we're talking about like 11-year-olds, 12, 13-year-olds, like young kids. And the average age of a girl trafficked in Korea is 12. It's actually not in the law, in South Korean law, that boys can be raped. So whereas there's assistance for girls, it only covers girls, when actually exploitation affects both genders, especially sexual exploitation. So then they take this kid and they start asking him for other things. Okay, well, if you don't give us this, if you don't send us these videos, if you don't send us these photos, we are going to show these videos to your family, we're going to project them to your school, and they start to blackmail the child with what's happening. And this is not the only nation that this happens in. This is just, I think because Korea is so tech forward and so tech savvy, we're seeing a big boom of that. And then oftentimes the kids actually commit suicide because they don't know what to do and they don't know how to get out of the situation that they have found themselves in. So there's kind of these different pieces of the pie, right? There's the legal piece of like having to change the laws to catch up with what's actually happening. There's the trafficking through kidnapping. In Korea, there's trafficking through runaways, exploitation, blackmail. There's this sextortion, which is like the blackmail of these teens that are happening through the internet. The kid is living at home, their parents think everything's fine, they have no idea what's going on. They're asking, in the nth room cases, they asked these kids to send these horrific videos of them like sexually abusing themselves, and then they would put them in chat rooms, and like thousands of people were watching these videos live. It was complete sextortion of these teenagers. So you're dealing with kind of different pieces of the puzzle. So really our heart right now as MWI is to understand the different pieces of this puzzle so that we can come together with what's happening in the global trafficking world, and then adapt those strategies to how we can actually implement them in Korea, how we can actually end exploitation here in South Korea, specifically around young people. So stay tuned, there will be more. Thanks for watching.